Hello, everyone. Welcome to the bi-weekly Tablas Creek Instagram live broadcast. Welcome to cloudy Paso Robles. This is sort of an unusual thing, and I'll talk about that in a moment. My guest this week is the eminent Jancis Robinson, Master of Wine, prolific author, sommelier to the late Queen of England. I can't wait to talk to her, but as I normally do, I'm going to share a few pictures first with what's going on around Tablas Creek. So our big news is that we had a rainstorm a couple of days ago. That is not normal for this time of year. I'll share a couple of pictures of the grapes with water on them. That is, again, it's unusual. Another one, that was Counoise. Here you can see Mourvedre. And one picture of just sort of the scene of the clouds. This was not a tropical monsoonal storm that wandered off course. It was instead an early winter storm that hit us roughly 6 weeks before we would normally expect it. We got about half an inch of rain, and then things cleared up and were sunny and nice yesterday, sunny this morning. And we feel like there aren't really going to be anything significant in the way of negative repercussions from this. It's not that unusual for it to be rain during harvest in the Rhone. Is unusual in Paso Robles, but for us, we think we'll be okay. For us right now, the big things that are going on is trying to clear space in the cellar. So there's a few different things that's going. First, our harvest chalkboard. You can see we're roughly 3/4 of the way done with harvest at this point. We are emptying out tanks, pressing off lots. We are steaming barrels in order to make room for the things that we're pressing off that will free us up to make this last push over the next couple of weeks. We are also, you can see, dumping bins into the press. We do have a few things that are still out. We're basically looking at the late ripening grape varieties out in the vineyard. So I took a picture of a few of those today. We have things like Counoise, looking very plump and luscious at the moment. We've got some Grenache. Not a lot of Grenache. We're probably down to our last quarter of the Grenache that's out there. And then we've got a little bit of Mourvedre that's still out. And that is looking great. So that's sort of what we're looking at right now. So we're nearing the home stretch of harvest. We took these last few days off. We were just waiting to let things dry out a little bit from the rain. We'll pick back up tomorrow, and then we're guessing probably have about 2 more weeks of work. So that's where we are. It's encouraging. I was a little worried about the rain. If you want to see some more pictures of that, it was the subject of my blog this week. But the sun and dry and breeze that we got yesterday really did the trick. It was exactly what we would have hoped for. Okay, so with that as introduction, I am going to invite Jancis to join me. There we go. I see. I just sent the invitation, and again, I could not be more excited about having her join the show this week. I hear a little bit in the background. I'm hoping that this will... Yes! Excellent. Good evening, Jancis.
Looking and listening.
I see you, but I see it buffering at this point. So it may be that the connection level, the Wi-Fi, is not as good as it was when we tested it yesterday. If you have a part of your house that is better able to get Wi-Fi, perhaps we could relocate there. Hello, everyone who is joining. Okay, so it looks like Jancis just hopped back out and will hopefully join back in. So welcome, everyone. We will we will have her hopefully back on in just a moment. We did a test yesterday, and things looked and sounded good. So I'm hopeful that it will again be the case. Okay. Let's try this one more time. Great. I just got the invitation from her. And hope that this will jump right in. Okay, I hear the sound again. That was the first thing last time. Hello, Jancis. Good evening.
Hi, hello. What I was trying to say is that looking and listening to you just now makes me realize how much more difficult it is to make wine than write about it. It's so easy to just sit at a laptop and, I admire you so much, all you wine producers.
Well, thank you very much. The admiration is mutual. Talking to a lot of winemakers on a regular basis, I think the thought of trying to wrap their heads around the complexities of the entire wine world, the number of different grapes that are out there, the histories that different wines in different places have, that's a pretty daunting pursuit in its own right.
I don't know. I was looking at your shop online today, Jason, and you seem to make most of those grapes.
I do feel like we maybe represent a broader slice of the diversity of the wine world than the average winery, but still, I think we grow 19 grape varieties. How many did you research and write about in your wine grapes book?
That the manuscript we had to hand in 2011, and we restricted ourselves to grape varieties whose wines were available commercially, and we came to 1,386. And I think my blessed co-authors, Jose Buemos and Julia Harding, we reckon that if we were to do a second edition, which we'd love to do one of these days, already we'd be well over 1,500, because people are kind of rediscovering indigenous varieties all over the world, aren't they? And bless them.
Yeah, seriously. I think that's one of the most fun things about the modern wine world, is that you have all of a sudden access to these grapes that formerly would have been limited to a single village or even a single vineyard in a single village. It's really quite amazing.
Although I suppose, yeah, I mean, it must be fun to experiment as a grower and a winemaker, but maybe those grapes are best suited to the places they come from, and I suppose it's a bit difficult when you're in Australia, where you don't have indigenous varieties. You've just got to choose some and see what's got to work.
Honestly, I feel like California is largely the same thing. I mean, there are some wild North American grapes, but by and large, they're not really things that you particularly want to have the wine from them. So,
well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Mission is enjoying its space in the sun now, isn't it? With the Chilean Pais kind of having introduced us all. That's quite interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like we jumped maybe in the middle of the story a little bit. I would love to start by asking you to share a little bit of your path into wine. Was wine on your family table growing up? Was it something that you had an interest in before say university, or did it come later?
Oh, definitely not till university. Wine was so exotic in the little village of 40 people that I grew up in the far north of England, that if anybody ever mentioned the word wine, they'd say, wine, the way they'd say Barbados. It wasn't part of life, put it like that. But when I got to university, it definitely was. And in fact, there were some great college cellars with, which I didn't know enough about wine to plunder, but I did have a friend who had been brought up with wine, and she taught me a little bit. She was very cerebral about it. She would kind of give me 2 glasses to compare, from 2 half bottles, or tell me that Mosel came in green glass and Hock came in brown glass, and I had a boyfriend then whose father gave him a bit too much money, and a bit of that was spent on wining and dining me. And there was one, I think for a lot of us who get into wine, not having been brought up with it like you, there is one seminal glass or bottle, and it was a Chambon Musigny Les Amoureuses 1959, and it was damn fine. And I just read, and it was so different from Student Plonk. And I just realized that here was something that could deliver masses of sensual pleasure as well as kind of intellectual stimulation, if you like, lots of things to get interested in, like history and geography and science and all that kind of thing. And people just won't believe this, but when I graduated, it was so long ago in Britain, that if I'd said I wanted to go into wine, all my friends would have said, what a shocking waste of an Oxford education. Because it had no social status then. It was, wine and food were seen as kind of bottom of the heap, frivolous subjects. So it took dropping out to Provence for a year, being surrounded by people for whom eating and drinking was what life was all about, that made me determined to come back when I got back to London, which I knew I would, to look for a job in either wine or food. And actually, it was luck that I was given a job on a wine trade magazine before going down a rabbit hole of cooking directors' dinners or something like that.
So the fact that your first job in wine was for a wine magazine suggests that like you had always thought of writing as a way into this as a profession. Is that the case?
I always loved writing, and my first article was published in the local newspaper, the Cumberland News, when I was 15, and it was a little fashion article, and I illustrated it, and I wrote. And when I was at Oxford, I was the restaurant correspondent of the university magazine and stuff like that. And on my way to the wine trade magazine, I did quite a bit of freelance writing. So yeah, I've always enjoyed writing.
So you were very early on the path to the Master of Wine. What was it like? What was your decision like in choosing to pursue that, and what was the pursuit of it like in that era?
It's a silly question. It's a silly answer. This was in 1984 when the Masters of Wine Institute suddenly realized that MWs were not immortal and that they needed to kind of keep refreshing the numbers, and opened it up slightly so that you didn't actually have to buy and sell wine to qualify as a student. And they actively asked me to have a go because I'd done quite well in the diploma exams leading up. And what impelled me was an article somewhere where someone compared various wine writers to different grape varieties. Now, at this stage, I was presenting the world's first TV series about wine, so perhaps was seen as a kind of popularizer or something. Anyway, the author compared my mentor, Edmund Penning-Rousel, who was a great Bordeaux expert, to Cabernet Sauvignon, long-lasting and a little bit tough to begin with, and blah, blah. My friend Oz Clarke was Chardonnay, sunny, open, blah, blah. I was Gamay, which I like Beaujolais as much as the next person, but the implication was here today, gone tomorrow, not serious. So that actually, I thought, I'll show him. I'll, have a go at the MW. But it was pretty stupid of me to do it because I was filming the second series of this thing called the Wine Programme. I was writing innumerable books at the same time. I was also pregnant, which had the good effect of heightening my sense of taste and also not making me feel like drinking it. And I was very lucky. I had a fair wind behind me, and I passed. But I did suggest to the TV producers that they film the process of doing the MW, and I could have fallen pretty flat on my face actually. But it really was easier then. They don't deliberately make it difficult now, but the wine world is just so much more complex than it was in 1984. that, I wrote an article about blind tasting the other day, and I pointed out in 1984, you could tell a white wine was Australian just by looking at it, because they all had this kind of green tinge, and they smelt Australian and stuff like that. And California Chardonnay was very different from white Burgundy, whereas a Sonoma Coast Chardonnay today, I think, could be confused with some white Burgundies, for instance. So it was easier, I must say.
But it's not like you stopped there in the research. I mean, I think, I mean, you sort of straddled the line between the articles making wine more approachable for people, and then also these deep dives into things for like the Atlas of the World Atlas of Wine, and for the wine grapes, where you really do get as deep as it's possible to get with the sources.
The small matter of the Oxford Companion to Wine, which I have edited for and the first one, I just had 800 double column pages to fill, and they were empty. And it was in the days before email, so all the contributions came in, on faxes or on bits of paper, and I had to take the complicated subject of wine and somehow divide it into, I think it was 3,500 entries then, alphabetically in topics, and what was the head word, what was the word that people might look up. And I think if people sometimes say, what use was your degree in maths and philosophy? At least the bridge between maths and philosophy is logic. And I think that logic helped me put together the Oxford Companion to Wine. But now I'm thrilled that my colleague, Julia Harding, and co-author of Wine Grapes, has agreed to take over lead editorship. So she has, I updated 10% of the entries. She and Tara Q. Thomas updated the other 90%, and they have just handed in the text. So the book will eventually come out next year. That's the 5th edition.
Remarkable. Do you have, like, in this process of discovery, do you have sort of regions that you that you feel like are like kind of criminally overlooked? Like, are regions that deserve, regions or grapes or styles that you feel like don't get the respect or don't get the prominence that they deserve?
Well, I've been giving answers to that question, for the same answer for some time now. So I've obviously got to kind of move on. But the answer I have been giving for some time is Portugal and Greece, for very similar reasons, that they have this rich array of their own grape varieties. It's a lot of fruit flies you're batting away there.
Yeah, it is. It's that seemed to have come out with the rain this week. The flies that are buzzing around my head. I'm not trying to signal you in some arcane way. It's just a bit annoying when they land on my face.
So it's, as you know, Portugal and Greece just have so many wonderful flavors and styles that are completely unique to them. And of course, they're pretty good at putting up with hot climates. So though those wines don't get the attention they deserve, and they should probably, a lot of them should be sold for slightly more money than they fetch. And then the one that I would, the big gap, I think, in the American market, not in the UK market, is South African wine. I mean, there are just so many brilliant winemakers there and lovely raw materials, amazing old vines. Yeah. And yet it has been quite difficult to get them in the US. And, I don't know whether you have a theory about that, but I remember somebody saying, was it the Ebola crisis? They kind of thought, oh, it's the same continent, maybe, but honestly, yeah, South Africa is so and there are lots of cool influences coming up from the South Pole. So it's not the case you're getting kind of great big galumping wines. Maybe on the balance, the whites are perhaps a little bit even better than the reds, but there are so many great wines, especially old Chenin Blanc. And I suppose the trouble is Chenin Blanc doesn't have a good reputation certainly not in California. But there, of course, they're kind of showing vignerons in the Loire how to make good wine from their own grape.
I've had a long connection to South Africa because the Vineyard Brands, the import company that my dad founded, at one point imported about 2/3 of the South African wine that came into the United States. So I feel like I've seen it for a long time, but I think you're right that it doesn't get taken with the seriousness that it deserves. And I'm sure some of it is the mix of grapes. I mean, I think Chenin Blanc is starting to get rediscovered here in California, but it's not really a must-have part of a wine list or a wine program in America now. I think some of it.
Go on, sorry.
No, sorry. I think some of it is that there was this early idea that South African red wines were pinotage, and like once you'd had a few pinotages, like, okay, great, you've discovered South Africa. So I think it's coming, but you're right, it has definitely been a slow process.
And I would suggest that since the wines that your father brought in were current, there really has been a revolution, a whole new generation of producers with different, not wanting to make copies of Cabernet and Chardonnay, and just rediscovering the old vines and different sort of areas. It's not just all Stellenbosch. Not that there's anything wrong with Stellenbosch, but it's so much wider than that. So time for a rediscovery, I think.
Absolutely. So my condolences on the recent passing of the Queen. I know that you were her sommelier for quite some time, and I don't know if there are any anecdotes you can share. But my wife at the very least would be very upset if I didn't ask.
Well, I'm not sure I was her sommelier. I was a member of the Royal Household Wine Committee, which afforded me very useful opportunities to taste blind, because they put out a tender every now and then. The big buzz was walking through the crowds outside Buckingham Palace, showing your pass, and then crunching across the gravel, to the palace, and then someone in a kind of red waistcoat and a tailcoat opening up the door, and you're shown into the cellar, and then we'd do some blind tasting, which is always useful in whatever context. The Queen herself was not a great wine lover. There's no secret about that. But I think the next generations are, and actually Camilla, the Queen consort now, her father was a wine merchant, and she is the patron of Wine GB, which is the sort of organisation for English and Welsh wine growers. And I think she really does have an interest in wine, and also I think the next one's down too, so that's good.
So the wine loving generations are in charge now. This is positive development, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was a great. I did have some meeting her and so on, and there was a great, wonderful state banquet at Windsor Castle, where I think 120 of us sat round one table. So I wasn't next to the Queen, and I wasn't next to Nicolas Sarkozy or Carla Bruni either. In fact, I was quite far down one end. But it was great fun, and there were some really good wines served. But there's always vintage port, but the Queen liked to get up from the table pretty smartly. So, and of course, once she gets up, everyone's got to get up. So you see, at the end of the meal, there's just a rather smart vintage port that no one can actually have time to drink. So actually, the royal cellar is quite full of vintage port.
Amazing. So I have a question about sort of how you choose topics to write about for a more general audience. So like things you do for the Financial Times.
Mm.
How do you go about choosing what's worth your time to write?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's a mix. Sometimes it's places I've been, wines that I've tasted. It's usually that stimulates it. For instance, I do a lot of tasting. London is a fabulous place to taste wine. There's so many tastings going on. There's a group of wine merchants called The Bunch, and I was at their annual tasting last week. And one of the wines that really struck me was actually from California. Can I remember the name? But it was a Grenache made by a woman whose aim is to make an answer to Chateaubriand.
Was it
Ring a bell?
the Grace? Was that the?
Yes. And that reminded me how many people around the world, Spain in particular, but not just Spain, are inspired by Reyes and want, think that is the essence. That's what I want to get out of Grenache. So maybe the next, in the next few weeks, I might write an article on that topic and do it, a global kind of roundup of, and also bring in the fact that as far as I can see, you can't buy Reyes anymore. It must be stashed up in a cellar somewhere. I mean, when was the last vintage that you got your hands on?
It's been a few years for sure.
Yeah. I think just sitting on it, that's something to explore as well. So that, I don't know, just one. What have I got? But I had a wonderful chance very recently to taste the 40 most recent vintages of Vega Sicilia, in Spain's finest restaurant. What's not to like? And I didn't, though, want to. For the website, I wrote, wrote up my tasting notes. I think I published them on Tuesday, and an article about Vega Sicilia. And that's good for people, visitors to jancisrobinson.com. But I didn't want to do an article for the Financial Times for a general readership and say, guess what? I had a great day. You weren't there, but so I decided to use the Vega Sicilia tasting as a basis for the argument that Cabernet Sauvignon may not produce the wine's longest living, may not be the grape that produces the world's longest living wines, may actually be Tempranillo, and kind of argue that case. So that was a way of using an experience for something more general. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I do think you've got to be careful about just. I mean, I am very, very lucky. I do get wonderful experiences, but I think the number of people who just want to read vicarious dining experiences is probably more limited than those who want to be titillated, be educated, be amused.
For sure.
Mm.
So you're just in the final stages of a writing competition that you have hosted for the last few years, and the topic this year was regeneration, which of course is something that we think a lot about here at Tablas Creek. Can you talk a little bit about how you came up with that as a topic? Why you thought that was something that was worth soliciting people's thoughts on?
Well, it's very much of the day, isn't it? In fact, last year's topic was sustainability, and people had to write about a wine producer who went the extra mile in terms of sustainability. And regeneration is obviously the next step on. And some people that we know well have founded something here in Britain with its base in Britain, but wanting it to be a global organization called the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation. So it just seemed as though it was in the zeitgeist, really. But and then what did we have? Oh, old vines. Maybe sustainability was 2020. Old vines was a nice topic for 2021. People just had to write a story about a vineyard with particularly old vines. This was regeneration, but they're all slightly heavy topics. I'm thinking next year we're going to have to go something quite light and fun. So any suggestions, gratefully welcome.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to read those. I've been enjoying reading the regeneration ones, and was flattered that a couple of the writers actually chose to talk about Tablas Creek, which I was
including a Brit who works for the Wine Society here. She devoted her whole article to you, which is a great read and was very popular with readers. And we're going to be announcing the winners and the runners-up on Friday on jancisrobinson.com.
Watch this space.
Yes, exactly. Drum roll.
Excellent. So I've just one more question and then a quick wrap up. The question is, so with all of these things that you have done and are doing, what next? What's next for you?
Well, I keep saying, because I have worked very, very hard ever since 1975. And a year ago, I sold jancisrobinson.com to an American digital publisher who own lots of other sites. And my current aim is to work towards less work and more perk. Do you know, does perk translate? Do you know what I mean? It means something nice that happens, but through your work. So I'm trying to work a bit less hard. And for the first time in my life, I have something which you will know what stands for, PTO. Do you know what PTO stands for?
No. Oh, paid time. Yes, I do.
Paid time off. Yeah. Perhaps you don't get it, but I've got it for the first time. So I'm busy trying to work out how to spend my last few days' allowance of PTO at the moment.
It is. It's really quite a remarkable concept that you have to absent yourself from your work and enjoy yourself for a few days and take that. Hard when you're running your own business.
It is, which is part of the reason I'm pleased I don't own the business anymore. But I really enjoy my work. So as my husband will attest, my fingers have to be prized off the keyboard quite often.
It is a wonderful thing working on a career that is something that you love to do. It's I mean, I saw my dad work happily into his late 80s because he loved what he was doing, and he had built his life around it, and couldn't imagine not having that be a part of his life, even as he chose to take a different balance between number of days in the office, amount of time off, amount of time on vacation, on the road. It was still, he was doing what he loved.
And he didn't put you off, which is great.
He didn't. He was very good at kind of holding the door open and showing me what was on the other side without making me feel like I was pushed through it. And I got to grow up surrounded by wine people, which by and large, wine people are really pretty fun and wonderful people. So
I agree. They're a very, very, although the wine bore has a sort of terrible reputation, they don't tend to be people who are in the profession of wine. They tend to be hangers-on who kind of boast about what's in their cellar or whatever. But people actually in wine tend to be pretty nice and interesting and fun. Yeah.
Yep, I'm pretty grounded because it's, again, you talked about this at the beginning, but wine is something which is tied to history and place and geology and geography in a way that very few other kind of collectible and consumable products are. And so if you're fascinated by wine, chances are pretty good that there's all of these other interests that it'll lead you to. Okay, so just as we wrap up, if people want to, I mean, most people who are here on this conversation know your work and know you well and admire you already. But for the handful of people who maybe are following Tablas Creek but don't yet know you, is the best way to follow your work to subscribe to jancisrobinson.com?
You don't have to subscribe. About a third of what we publish is free. And we have a massive learn section, for instance. So just visit jancisrobinson.com and navigate around it. And there are books aplenty. There's a BBC Maestro, it's called, online wine course. That's a recent thing. I always forget how long it lasts, but I know it's got 20-something lessons in it, and it's very high production values. No, but the easiest free thing is just navigate around jancisrobinson.com.
I would also submit that you are an excellent person to follow on Twitter. I know I often find a lot of the conversations that I end up getting involved in, the most interesting ones, start or nudged in a good direction by something that you share.
Okay, good. That's very kind of you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me, spending a part of your Wednesday evening in front of a screen instead of enjoying some wonderful dinner or something else I'm sure that you could be doing. So thank you for joining.
I'm off for a very nice glass of wine and a little something to eat. So, but it's been a great fun, and very best of luck with the rest of the harvest.
Thank you very much. We're on the home stretch now.
Okay, congratulations. Good. I look forward to eating.
Again,
thank you.
You are.
Bye.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jancis, again for joining. I will be back in 2 weeks. My next guest will be Paul Greco, the sommelier and wine bar owner in New York, founder of the Summer of Riesling. I will look forward to that. Meanwhile, if you're out there harvesting, good luck. If you are out there enjoying the first few days of fall, enjoy those as well. So cheers. Thank you again, Jancis. Bye, everyone.